Hi, I'm Steve. You're watching Gear Stuff and Things, and today on the channel we're going to talk about my transition from the Intel-based world of Mac to the Apple Silicon-based world of Mac. So stick around and we're going to get into it.
If you like gear, stuff, and things, and you're enjoying the channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button. Make sure you hit the bell notification so that YouTube lets you know every time a new video goes up. And of course, if you like the video, smash that like button.
All right, so to catch any of you up that aren't familiar with what's going on, Apple and Intel have been working together since 2006. In 2021, that partnership has came to an end. Apple has developed their own chip, and it's not really that big of a surprise if you actually pay attention. So throughout that 16-year period of them working together, the iPhone was introduced, the iPad was introduced, and by the fourth generation of the iPhone, Apple had started developing its own chips. So the A4 came into play, and since then they've just slowly been developing and advancing in technology. And I can't even say that it's slow, because it's been a really quick jump in kind of concept to where it's at today. So over that period of time, they started developing their own thing. Ultimately, that time focused in development led them to get to a point where they were developing a chip for their own computers and desktops and laptops that would basically remove the need for them to have a third-party processor provider. So out walks Intel. Sad time for Intel. They're not going to hurt. There's plenty of other companies out there they're going to make stuff for, and that's a whole other thing. That's not what this channel is about. So you can go and research everything that happened between those two companies. You can look up more detail associated with the actual technical specifications of the M1. This is not a tech-based channel, but this is probably going to be the most tech-focused video I've ever done. But there's a reason behind it, and it correlates with the channel's ultimate goal, which is to share stuff about gear, stuff, and things. This falls into all those categories, but mostly I treat this as a musical tool. And if you run a studio at home or a full functional facility, the computer is ultimately the heart and the brains of your facility. Most of the things you do externally, writing songs on guitars, keyboards, things of that nature, ultimately ends up in the computer. So this is where the two worlds connect. And the main reason that I made this shift was mostly because my previous computer, which was a 2015 MacBook Pro, which in my opinion is the best MacBook Pro that Apple has ever made up until the current generation, which I'm not completely sold on the current generation either, and I'll tell you why later. However, in 2015, that was the last year you could buy a laptop from Apple and upgrade it yourself. You could buy the tools, buy the parts, and spend the time and replace the battery. You could replace the RAM and upgrade the RAM. You could replace the hard drive and upgrade the hard drive, and that's what I did. I maxed it out to the most of its capability, and it was just on its last legs. And well, to be truthful, it was perfect for audio. And if I was only doing audio and not doing any of this video stuff, the 2015 MacBook Pro would have been more than enough for me for at least the next 10 years, just doing audio. Well, that gets different because I'm doing more video. Obviously, we're doing video here. I'm filming this, editing this in the M1, but I'm also filming this in 4K, and that's where my problems started to occur. So in Final Cut on my 2015, when I would import stuff in 1080, no problem, I could get through it. But as I added layers and different things, it would start to bog down. And then when I would start to do color grading, even at the 1080, things would start to get slow. So that created a work process for me that was okay, and I was making do, but it was also slowing me down a bit with doing what I wanted to do with the videos. So I was basically doing a bunch of edits, then getting to the point where the computer would kind of start to not like what I was doing. I'd export that as a finished product, then import that finished product in and continue to do edits to it, kind of like people used to do with limited tape machines back in the day. So it worked, nothing wrong with it. It's annoying, it's a pain in the ass, and that's something I wanted to get away from. So moving on to doing more video stuff meant I needed to get a system that was at least more powerful, or at least powerful enough to do video edits and stuff. I realized I said that weird, and I apologize. What I needed was a computer that could do better work on video. So that's where my hunt began. And at this point, I didn't even know M1 existed. So I started looking at used Mac Pros because I can't afford a brand new 5,000 plus Mac Pro. So I figure maybe I can save up $2,000 or something and get a used Mac Pro and try to spec it out over time. Okay, well, if I do that, cool, I've got a used Mac Pro. Say I buy the trash can for like $1,400 or to $2,000. Great. Now, if I want to upgrade it, I'm going to start spending more money, right? So probably going to spend $3,000 altogether to get it where I want it, or at least as powerful as I feel it needs to be. And at a certain point, it may still not be enough for video stuff. It might be fine, but I'm still out, $2,000 to $3,000. Okay, well, if I'm going to go that route, maybe I'll just build a computer. So I'll find all the stuff, all the parts, try to keep myself under $2,000, but set $2,000 as my cap, and pick out everything I want and build one. And then I have to make it a Hackintosh because I'm used to running Logic, I'm used to running Final Cut Pro. So those are my main tools here for creation. So I need to be able to run those. The problem with the Hackintosh is that I can't update it. Once it's there, and it's there for good. And I can't really go between systems. If I do get a new laptop or I keep the 2015, it just becomes, I don't know, there's a whole world of difficulties that would arise from that. So from there, I moved on to looking at the Mac Mini, but the Intel version Mac Mini, and speccing it out, easily over $2,000. In January of this past year, I started seeing a lot of hype and articles associated with this new Apple Silicon, the M1, and I started seeing things about the M1X and all these grandiose ideas associated with the future of computing. And honestly, I ignored it because I'm a bit cynical, and when things are overhyped, well, they tend to be overhyped. However, after many months of research, reading and watching videos and benchmark comparisons and other things, I was starting to lean towards the M1 and believe it to not just live up to the hype, but be kind of the future of computing maybe, or at least leading to the future of computing. And I may be wrong there, but I feel like it's a safe bet, at least for right now. So I was already in the M1 direction, but then 3 buddies of mine bought M1s. And some of those guys you may know. So Nick Hill, who is a buddy of mine who I worked on the Wells project with here, and I'll put links to all that stuff in the description. Scott Bunn, The Bun, who you may know from Baritone Obsessed and Bandless and stuff with Nick Hill, and my buddy Josh Gwynn from Springverb. All 3 of those gents got the M1 and different versions of the M1. So I was able to bounce some questions and concerns and ideas off of each of those fellas and kind of come to a conclusion. And ultimately that conclusion was that I was going to be parting with my 2015 MacBook Pro. It's going to be a moment for me. So enter the M1, more specifically the MacBook Air M1. And why the MacBook Air, you might be curious. Well, I was curious too. As a matter of fact, I wasn't even looking at the MacBook Air at all because my previous experience with it was that it was basically a useless device for my needs. And so I kind of went into it only looking at the MacBook Pro. Then I started seeing a lot of videos that were showing stuff about how the MacBook Air was beating the shit out of previous generation MacBook Pros. And not just the entry-level ones, but the $3,000 and $4,000 upgraded versions of the MacBook Pro of 2020 and 2019 were getting their asses handed to them by the entry-level MacBook Air M1. So that was one vote in the direction of the Air. Second, I reached out to Nick Hill, who is someone I do a lot of stuff here on the channel with, and I mentioned before, and you probably only know that I exist because of Nick Hill or Bun, but Nick Hill has the entry-level MacBook Air M1, the 7-core version of it, and he is doing red 6K edits, no issues, no throttling, so that was another vote in favor of the MacBook Air. Now I got into the differences between the MacBook Air and the MacBook Pro. The biggest differences between the two are, well, one has a fan and the taskbar, and the other doesn't have a fan or a taskbar. So, with that information in mind, I started doing some more research and discovered that for my needs, I don't necessarily need the fan because the RAM is never going to be taxed enough with what I'm doing to throttle or to require cooling of that degree. How did I make that determination? Well, I watched a bunch of benchmarks that compare different things. A lot of them super exaggerate the needs of the system in order to test their capabilities. And then there's a few folks that are very specific to things that they're doing and where they have issues and where they don't. So for me, I'm primarily going to be doing some light 4K editing with some light color grading with a little bit of effects here and there, but for the most part, pretty basic stuff. For audio stuff, audio takes less resources and power to manage than video, so I know I'm already good, and that's kind of what led me to make the 8 gig decision, because the benchmarks kind of show that I'm never going to peak out where I would need to be worried about the 16 gigs for at least my laptop. That being said, with having spoken to Nick, doing the research, and just overall really beating myself to death trying to figure out what was the right choice for me, I went with the medium option of the MacBook Air. So I am 512 storage, 8 gigs of RAM, and the 8-core version. And having no issues, I am able to scrub through 4K video and do edits without any delays, no pinwheel of death, no slowdowns. Everything works great for me, especially if I'm doing stuff that's less than 4K. So the 1080 footage, it's doesn't even do anything to the computer at all. 4K footage, amazing. I'm getting exactly what I need. My workflow is exactly where I want it to be. No workarounds. I'm just doing what I need to be doing. For audio, I am able to completely max out everything, use exactly what I want to use every plugin I want to use, as far as the ones that are compatible, and we'll get into that in the next section here. But I'm able to do what I want to do with multi-track outs for MIDI stuff and apply all of the plugins right inside of the mix like I want, without doing any workarounds or having to change latency or all those sorts of things. So it does exactly what I need it to do, and it doesn't give me a hard time about it, and that is the ultimate goal here. I wanted a machine that was fully capable of handling anything I would throw at it, and this is it. I'm not worried about it. Everything is running swimmingly. Difficulties. Well, as with any transition into some sort of new tech or new device of any kind, or something that's just new on the scene, there's going to be hiccups. There are going to be a few setbacks, and the M1 is not special in that regard. There are some bits of software and bits of hardware that just don't work on the M1 yet. There are plenty of third-party plugins for audio and video that simply do not work on the M1 yet. I am a Slate plugins user, have been for a few years. Slate plugins don't work on the M1 yet. Now, there are a few people that are saying they're getting it to work on Rosetta. If you don't know what Rosetta is, or Rosetta 2, do some research. That's a whole other thing. Again, this isn't necessarily a tech channel, so I'm not going to get into that. You have 2 versions of the software you can run. You can run native M1, or you can run a thing called Rosetta that basically emulates an Intel device, in the long and short of it. So anyhow, Slate plugins don't work. There's a few other plugins that don't work for audio stuff. So that was a bit of a hang up. Aside from that, I was able to, in my subscription there, which saves me some money each month, and get some plugins from Waves that do exactly what I need them to do, and they're functioning just fine, even natively functioning fine inside of Logic Pro and inside of Final Cut Pro. I have no issues with them. So yeah, aside from the annoying stuff like that and the dongle hunting, which is kind of the biggest limitation of the physical devices, there's only 2 inputs and or outputs. So you have to get some dongles and docks and adjust to things. That part of it kind of sucks, but not a deal breaker. Everything works fine. So I wouldn't even worry about it that much, because as time is going on, more things are starting to be compatible, and that's the only way it could go. If any of these companies want to continue to work with Apple and have their plugins and their pieces of hardware and software, available to the Apple consumer, which is a big market, they're going to have to adapt and make their software work. So a lot of companies are making the shift over. Adobe's starting to, like I said, the Wave stuff is working great. You're going to start seeing more stuff coming over to it working just fine. So don't sweat it too much. If it's something that you're worried about, if I'm buying it, you're going to have to worry about something not working. Most of your stuff's going to work. Do a little research, but most of your stuff's going to work. It was something that made me hesitant initially, but it's fine. I got over the challenges initially, and I'm up and running right where I want to be. In summation, I feel like we're at the forefront of a bit of a modern renaissance when it comes to digital creators and what we're going to be capable of because of tools like this. And I know there's a lot of people that are, well, I only use PC, so this doesn't even apply to me, and I only use Mac. Okay, well, just being realistic about it, it's only a matter of time before there's a PC equivalent of this. It's going to happen, and as time moves on and things like the M1 become more commonplace, and clearly they are a competitor to these other things, there's going to be versions of it in the PC world as well that will not only keep up with it or compete with it directly, or probably be more cost effective. So while people are a bit hung up on it right now, or maybe mad that Apple is kind of swinging hard right now, it's only a matter of time before all the companies are making some version of this. It's just reality. It's going to happen. So you can wait and get a PC version of this, or, you know, if you're still someone who wants to build a PC, go crazy. But if you're someone who's looking to transition into the M1 Apple architecture, the barrier to entry is fairly low. You can get the base model Mac Mini. I've seen them as low, brand new, for $650, and I've seen them on the refurbished website, pretty decked out, for what is about $699, $799. So it doesn't take a lot of money to get into this supercomputer M1 world and have a super functional machine, and I think that's the part that's exciting. So exciting, in fact, that I plan to buy a Mac Mini, the 16 gig version of it, because I want to have something that does have that headroom, so I can maybe at some point get into more heavy stuff if I want to, but also just something that I can have one stationary machine that stays at home that is here for that, and then I can pick up my laptop and with a few external drives have everything be unison, and I can go do what I need to do with no problems. So I know this has been a long-winded video, and I appreciate you taking the time to watch it. All I can say is, if you're someone who is interested in transitioning from the Intel world to the Apple Silicon world, as long as you're willing to give up things like the Slate plugins initially and have a little bit of patience, you're going to get a machine that is out of this world and capable of doing things that computers only in the 5,000 plus mark beforehand could really handle. So that's it. I appreciate you taking the time to watch the video. Thanks so much for hanging out. If you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. Also, check out the Wells project. I'll put a link to that in the description, as I mentioned earlier in the video. But until next time, bye. Oh yeah, it's been me. It's been you. This is Gear Stuff and Things. I almost forgot that. How did I forget that? It's something I do every video. It's been a while. Sorry. More videos are coming soon, though. See ya.